In the late 19th century, London was a city of contrasts. The Industrial Revolution had transformed it into a bustling metropolis. But with that growth came poverty and despair, especially in areas like Whitechapel. It was here, in 1888, that a series of gruesome murders would capture the public's imagination and instill fear in the hearts of its residents. The victims were primarily women, many of whom were engaged in prostitution to survive. The so-called canonical 5 victims of Jack the Ripper are Mary Ann Nichols. Mary Ann Nichols was the first known victim of Jack the Ripper. She was found dead on August 31st, 1888 in Bucks Row, Whitechapel. Mary was 43 years old and had a hard life, often working as a prostitute to survive. On the night she was killed, people saw her talking to a man before she disappeared. When her body was discovered, it showed terrible signs of violence. Her throat was cut and her stomach was slashed open. This shocking murder scared the community and made people very worried. The police had no clues and struggled to find the killer, marking the start of a series of brutal attacks. 2. Annie Chapman. Annie Chapman was the second victim, murdered on September 8, 1888. She was found in the backyard of a house on Hanbury Street. Annie was 47 years old and also faced poverty and alcohol problems. She had lost her family and lived a difficult life. Annie's murder was especially brutal. Her throat was cut deeply and her stomach was opened with some organs removed. This violence suggested the killer knew about human anatomy. The police were frustrated as they still had no leads and the public was terrified about the safety in their neighbourhood. 3. Elizabeth Stride. Elizabeth Stride, known as Long Liz, was the third victim, found on September 30th, 1888. She was discovered in Dutfield's yard just hours after Annie's murder. Elizabeth was 44 years old and was friendly, often helping others, but she also struggled to get by. Her murder was different from the others. Elizabeth's throat was cut, but there were no other serious injuries. Some people believe the killer might have been interrupted. This added to the fear in the community, and the police increased their patrols to try to catch the killer. 4th, Catherine Eddowes. Catherine Eddowes was the 4th victim, found on the same night as Elizabeth Stride, on September 30th, 1888. She was discovered in Mitre Square after midnight. Catherine was 46 years old and had a troubled life, often dealing with alcohol problems. Her murder was very brutal. Catherine's throat was cut and her body was badly mutilated. This showed that the killer was becoming more violent, which scared everyone. The double murder that night created even more panic, and the police were under great pressure to solve the case. 5. Mary Jane Kelly. Mary Jane Kelly was the 5th and last known victim, murdered on November 9th, 1888. She was found in her own room at 13 Miller's Court, which was unusual because the other victims were found outside. Mary was 25 years old and had a difficult life, but seemed to be in a more stable situation. Her murder was the most horrific of all. The killer inflicted deep wounds, and her body was almost unrecognizable. This extreme violence shocked the police and the public. After Mary's murder, there were no more killings linked to Jack the Ripper, leaving a mystery that still fascinates people today. The Metropolitan Police launched a massive manhunt, but the investigation faced significant challenges. The lack of forensic science at the time hindered their efforts, and the media frenzy surrounding the case complicated matters further. Letters claiming to be from the killer began to surface, including the infamous Dear Boss letter, which was signed Jack the Ripper. This letter, along with others, fueled public interest and fear. Despite the extensive investigation, which included door-to-door inquiries and public appeals for information, no one was ever arrested for the murders. Over the years, numerous suspects have emerged, leading to speculation about the killer's identity. Some of the most notable include Montague John Druitt, a barrister who committed suicide shortly after the last murder; Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant and resident of Whitechapel, who was institutionalized for mental illness. Walter Sickert, a painter whose work often depicted scenes related to the murders. However, no conclusive evidence has ever linked any of these individuals to the crimes. Jack the Ripper's legacy extends far beyond the murders themselves. He has become a symbol of the fear and uncertainty of the Victorian era. The case inspired countless books, films, and even academic studies, leading to the creation of a vast body of literature examining the mysteries surrounding his identity.